But let me start by telling you that you guys are my first class. So there could be some, things here and there. Okay, I am going to start because this is going to be really long because even stuff that's the same, they change the wording on. There's a lot of stuff to go over, but I'm worried that when we get to the end, people will be exhausted. So I want to start with some really important stuff at the end. Okay. Do you all have an agreement in front of you? I didn't really want to share my screen, but I will if I need to.
I've posted in the chat box a PDF of the agreement that they can download.
Oh, okay. I emailed one to Josie.
Cindy, is it you don't want to share your screen because you have stuff on it?
No, the reason is normally when I share my screen, I teach from the screen. And so I'm looking at my screen and sharing it, but now I'm kind of teaching from my 8 million notes I have. And so but I don't mind doing it for them if people need it.
Or no?
So you think we should, right?
Well, I don't know.
Can't hurt, right? But then I got to keep up with it.
Cindy, do you want me to share the screen?
Oh, will you?
Yes. Let me
then
give
I
you
don't have to keep worrying about what page we're on.
Let me give you my Venmo account.
I think I have it.
All right.
Okay, so we're going to start at the end. And we're going to go to the very, very last page, which is page 16, just for a minute. And I want you to see, because there's a couple of really good things. So on page 16, you'll see where it says the agent signature, and then it says designated electronic delivery address. That is new. So if you put in your email address or your text, then any notice that you deliver to that address is good the day it's delivered, no matter what. Okay, we don't have to prove that they opened the report and saw it. We only have to prove that we sent it, as long as those are filled in for both the buyer and the seller agents. So that's a really good thing, and it's at the very end, so you might not notice it. The other thing on the going up, where am I? Oh, going up one page, the definition of delivery or delivered has changed. Okay, so if you use the word delivered, or delivery of documents, unless otherwise agreed, means that they shall be effective upon personal receipt of the document by buyer or seller at their authorized agent. Personal receipt means a copy of the document or receipt of a copy of the document, or as applicable link to the document, is in the possession of the party, or authorized agent, regardless
Cindy,
of the delivery method used.
What page am I supposed to be on?
Oh, I'm sorry, page 13.
13.
Oh, I'm sorry. I said one page up, huh?
Yep, you did.
I don't know why I said that. So,
okay, there we go.
You'll see in 13K, I mean, on number K on page 13, they've changed the definition of delivery. So now, as long as you've sent the document, it is considered to be delivered, and it's not when they open it or when they see it. It's when it was sent and whether it's in their inbox. So you really need to check your emails, because this is going to be a big issue that it's considered. You can't say, oh, I didn't see that and I didn't have notice, because now it says you have notice. Okay, there's other stuff here, but let's go back to the beginning. I just wanted you to be aware that we have different definitions of delivery, and we need to put our email address in so that we can agree that that's a good method of delivery, which clearly is what everybody uses. Okay. Oh, I see you're sharing here, so I'm going to take this offline so it doesn't confuse me. Okay, let's start at the top. The top looks familiar. The first couple pages, right? The first couple lines, date prepared, who it's from, what the address is, up till assessor's parcel number. It looks pretty familiar. Not very much though. Date prepared, I've been asked about this before. Date prepared has no significance whatsoever for the contract. Okay, so if it's not there, you're not going to get penalized. It's so that you can refer to it. The document prepared on date blank, if it's not signed or whatever. So it's only for your own, for the own use. So you don't ever have to fill that in. I mean, you have to fill it in, but it doesn't start anything. I get asked that now and then. Does it start days running? What does it mean? Doesn't mean anything. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna tell you my controversial thing. So on the very first line, 1A, this is an offer from. Question is if your offer is from a trust, what do you put on the first line? And I'm going to tell you that I differ from the opinion of the car attorney who gave the class I took. His is probably more practical and mine is probably more legal. And so either one is probably okay. So I think the trust itself, the name of the trust goes on the first line. That is who owns the property, or that is who's making the offer, the trust, not the people who sign, not the trustees, the trust, because it's getting bought through a trust. So they're the ones who make the offer. You would put the name of the trust, the name of the LLC, the name of the whatever on the first line, the real buyer. If you decide, or your client wants their name on there and that you want to put the names, you could put the Cindy Rubin Trust by Cindy Rubin Trustee. Or you could just put the names of the trustee, and where I've been mad about that in the past, I will let that go in the future because apparently it's acceptable. So either one, but I prefer that you use the real name of the client. Okay. Okay, number 2 is the agency, and they made kind of a big deal, I feel like, about it on this long form about we no longer have to exchange our ADs.
Well, Cindy, you just said you want the name of the trust or the name of the trustees that
The
people who are,
trust. The
okay.
trust.
Oh, that's what you prefer.
I believe that's the legal way. But I'm not going to complain if you put something else, which I used to. Okay. So again, we used to have to give the seller used to have to give the buyer their AD, their agency form, and they used to exchange them. And this says now you don't have to do that. You're not legally required to do it. Doesn't matter if you do it, but you don't have to. There's a lot of things they changed that we don't really have issues with, but there must be big issues in other places because otherwise I can't figure out why they would change them. Okay, seller's broker, buyer's broker, same thing. We had that before. Okay, C, number 2C is brand new. It's a checkbox where you can check if the brokerage representing the buyer, if there's more than one brokerage. So if you're co-listing or co-representing the buyer with another brokerage, you check the box, it will bring up the form that you need for 2 brokers. So that didn't used to have that checkbox there, but now it does. Okay. Okay, potentially competing buyers and sellers, the same paragraph, it tells them that we're attaching the possible representation agreement. Okay, number 3. So the car attorney lovingly referred to paragraph 3 as the grid. I don't know if that's what they're always going to call it or whatever, but paragraph 3 now is what we have. I think it's probably the dream of TCs and escrow, where they don't really have to worry about the back stuff, just this stuff, right? It's all right here. But you guys have to worry about the whole agreement. So paragraph 3 summarizes all of the obligations in the agreement that are built into the agreement. It doesn't have in here things like termite. So you might think, oh, I got it, this one looks more complete than before. Well, I still got to remember to add my termite because there's no termite in here. Okay, so let's just start. Purchase price is the purchase price, the usual. They give you a place there to put all cash. You can see they try to save space, but it still ended up being 16 pages. Okay, close of escrow date. And then on the left side, it tells you, like the left side, this is paragraph 3A, 3B, 3C, whatever. And then the paragraph number is where in the document you can read more about this. Okay, so like close of escrow has nothing. There's no other paragraph that says close of escrow. This is it. But most of the paragraphs have something where you can learn more about the obligations and what you have to do. Okay, so close of escrow. Notice that they're not leaving like a lot of blank in here. So how come I used to see all the time 30 days or sooner? Obviously, sooner means that we have to agree to sooner. And if you're going to have to agree to it anyway, it doesn't need to be in here, because if you agree, you agree. So it doesn't give you any place to put that. So I'm not going to see that anymore, I don't think, the sooner, but it just gives you a place to either put a date or the number of days. And again, you can don't be upset about not putting or sooner, because you can still close sooner if everyone agrees, if you're not losing anything. Okay. But that gets put on a lot of contracts. Okay. Okay, the expiration, again, it defaults to 3 days, just like it did before. Or you can put in, whatever you want to put in there. Okay. Okay, initial deposit amount, again, this is it. notice that they put in here the dollar amount, and then in parentheses, they put what percent. This was not meant ever to have just a percent in it. It's always meant to have a dollar amount written in it. And then if you want, you could fill in the percent to show them that what they're depositing is 2% or 3%, and that's okay. But it's the dollar amount we need on number D2. Okay. Increase deposit. Okay, so that's the initial deposit, and then on the far right, within 3 days, so that for some reason the initial deposit is the only place in the whole agreement that uses business days. Everything else is calendar days. So when it says within 3 business days, you have to get that in. Weekends don't count, Monday through Friday. So you could change that. You could put a date in there, you know, what we're whatever you want. You could change it to, you know, to 2 calendar days, whatever you want, but it defaults to 3 business days and weekends don't count. But that is the only place in the contract we use business days, which makes no sense to me. Okay. Okay, next one, increased deposit. You know, we don't see a lot of increased deposits, but I guess you guys know that if you have an increased deposit, it doesn't become part of the original deposit unless you have a separate form that makes it part. And it used to be called the RID, but they've changed the name of it to the DID. So if you check increased deposit, it will bring up the DID. We do not, there's a few forms in here that are brand new. We do not have those yet. They are not out yet. And as soon as they're out, we'll go over the ones that I don't know if we'll go over this one, but we'll go over the ones that we're going to need to use a lot. So that's the increased deposit, and then those are the terms of the increased deposit. I don't know. I audit a lot of files. I don't see very many increased deposits. Okay, loan amount. Okay, so this is where you're going to put in. So it shows you the first. In E1 is first loan. You're going to put in your first loan amount. You're going to fill in all this. It defaults to buyer to pay 0 points, which is the same thing as defaulting to we don't have an agreement that it has to be anything in particular. So if your buyer doesn't want that, then you can change it. You know, we see that countered out a lot by sellers, but you can certainly, you see everywhere there's a blank, you can make a change. Okay, it asks on the far right what kind of loan it is. This is really good for everyone because conventional is up there and there's no checkbox, so you can't check it because you didn't realize it was defaulting to conventional. There's nowhere to check conventional or to write it in. So this is good. So everyone will be on the same page, but it is definitely defaults to conventional unless it's something's checked. Okay, 5C2, additional financed amounts. So this is where you would put if there was other additional financing other than maybe a standard, you know, a second, or if seller was carrying back a small second. Sometimes our sellers carry back a small second. Just so you guys know, we do, if you have a seller, you can make a deal by having a seller carry back paper. We do the note and the deed of trust for you as an accommodation, no charge to the client. We just have them fill out the information and then, you know, make it from there. Okay, I'll throw in a few advertisements while I'm doing this. Okay, E2, oh, that's E2. Okay, E3, occupancy type, just looks pretty much like what we've seen before, except that it defaults to primary. You don't have to check it. It defaults to that. So if you skip this box altogether and you're selling and it's an investment, then you're going to miss that it defaulted to primary. So you know, I'm hoping that this is so succinct that people will actually read it. Okay, balance of down payment, that's going to go in the purchase price, and now we have our purchase terms. Okay, top of page 2.
Cindy,
Yeah.
I got a question. Before, when you said that also that you can put a co-broker on in the top of the page number 1, when you said you have a listing agent,
Yeah.
and then the buyer agent, a co-broker, is that replacing to do referrals, or the referrals will still handle it the way they
No,
do
this is if you're actually co-listing or co-representing the buyer together. That is not, it's not when you're giving someone a referral. When
Okay.
someone gets a referral agreement, they're usually not involved in the transaction. They just get the referral agreement.
Right. Okay.
So that it's a difference between those two. Yeah. Okay. Top page. Okay. So this is new, and I don't know. I mean, at least they put it here in black and white. Seller credit to buyer, if any. I know I read that in the wrong order, but so here is where the buyer will, if they want to, will ask for $2,000 in closing costs or whatever. So now it's right here. We're going to see it. It's not going to get buried. This is where you ask if you're representing the buyer and you want the seller to pay a particular, to give you a credit, not we're going to get to who pays for stuff later on, but to give you a credit, then this is where you put it. Okay, they do give you a small line for additional finance terms. They try not to put too many blanks in here for people to write too much stuff, because of course they think they covered it all. But you know how that goes. Maybe they covered it all, you know, for November of 2021, but maybe next year we have something new, you know. So they do put a few blanks. Okay. Okay, so we're done with okay, so now we're verification of cash. So the next three are the verifications of all cash, of down payment, or of loan application. They all default to 3 days, and you can change those. Those are pretty similar to what we had before. The one thing they did add is for the verification of loan application. On the far right, they gave you a few boxes to decide which verification you are going to require. So you could just the pre-qual, just the pre-approval, or you know, or do you need fully underwritten pre-approval, you know, seller. So this is what they have to give you, the buyer has to give you, and so that you can, obviously the buyer's filling this out and they're going to put in whatever it is they have, but it's the seller could clearly counter that if they wanted. Okay, next section, which they left the title blank because it doesn't have a title. The final verification, they added the final walkthrough, which used to be somewhere in there. And notice this says 5 days prior to close of escrow. That sounds pretty certain, right? Like you have to do it on the 5th day before the close. I don't think they meant it that way. Matter of fact, I'm sure they didn't mean it that way. And that got pointed out to the car attorney when I took the class. And he was, oh, how did we miss that? So I don't know if it's going to change before the final comes out or not, but you know, it's around 5 days before the close of escrow. The assignment, and the second one is brand new, assignment request. So sometimes a party asks to assign, a buyer asks to assign the contract to someone else. So this is giving a number of days that you can do that. It's always been just open-ended, you know, if you assign it. And there's all kinds of new, when we get to the assignment paragraph in the further down, there's all kinds of new assignment things. There's you know, now it's absolutely, you have an absolute right to assign it if you're a company to a subsidiary, and those people don't have to re-sign things. There's some new rules on assignments, but they're also putting a limit on it. So we can't have a 30-day escrow on day 29. You say, I'm assigning it to this guy. Okay, we're gonna have a number in here.
Yeah, on that assignment request, should we put 0?
Well, I mean, sometimes lately I feel like we've seen quite a bit of assignments. No, but let's 10 days. We want to know about it sooner than later. Figure it out. So, okay.
Hey, Cindy, a question in regards about the 5 days prior close of escrow. Right now, there is a lot of escrows that you do in a seller's rent back.
Right.
Is that okay? If you need to change, you know, you cannot do it after the close of escrow, obviously, right? So
yeah, you know, I think that's an issue we have a lot, and I can't believe that they didn't deal with it in here, and I can't remember if they dealt with it in paragraph 16. But yes, often they want to do either two. What you want to do one right away, okay? You want to do one before the close of escrow, because your agreement in the contract is that they're going to deliver the property at the close of escrow in the same condition it was at when you bought it. So if you don't do one, then you don't know what happened prior to the close of escrow that they 100% have to fix, right? Because it has to be in the same condition. Or if it happened after when they were a tenant, and yeah, maybe that we have an agreement that says they have to fix it, but we're on a whole different kind of agreement. So it you know, that, so it kind of depends. But I agree. I think it should be one before and then one before they move out as well. I before the buyer takes possession, they should want to do a walkthrough to make sure that they don't get blamed for anything, right?
Cindy, this is Abigail. I have a question regarding the assignment. I'm not sure if maybe everybody understands what assignment means, but is it? I'm a bit confused.
Sometimes we have agents, and we've had 2 or 3 of these, I'd say in the last 2 weeks or 3, where actually the buyer was assigning it to someone for money even. But where the buyer agrees to pay and then they change their mind, say it's a corporation, I'm going to give it to my subsidiary. I'm not going to own it in the big corporation. I'm going to own it in the small corporation.
I'm
So
sorry.
I'm
is it-
transferring the right. There's a form called the AOAA for that. For
Is that
transfer
like-
changing a buyer. That's an assignment for the buyer assigning the right to someone else.
So I'm sorry, it's almost like a wholesaler too, right? Like, you know, those.
Well, there are people, like, I tell you, I haven't seen one of these in forever, and we 3 in the last couple of weeks of the wholesalers, right, buying it and reselling it.
Okay, thank you.
It was complicated on the first one, but I think we got it now.
Cindy, I have a question.
Mhm.
Is there a difference between to an assignee or assignment? What does that
Well,
mean?
and the assignee is just the person who gets the assignment. But so if I contract to do this and I decide that instead of me buying it, I'm gonna have my children buy it. You know what? I'm gonna give them the money, put it in their name. I don't want to deal with it. So I can do an AOAA and I would put down that the new buyers are gonna be this person and this person. And the AOAA requires that those people sign every document that's been done so far. I mean, I just looked at one where we did an assignment and they never had the new buyer sign anything. If I have the buyer, I don't care. If I have the seller, I care, right? I want protection from the new buyer too. And every disclosure that they sign is protection. So, and we have ways to get around that. If there's a lot of documents, you know, we can do one memorandum, you know, one addendum that just says all the documents are, you know, approved and as if they were signed on the original. You know, we don't have to go back and sign, but we have to have something like that for a
So because one listing agent was mentioning to me that they don't want to accept an offer where it says assignee because it almost sounds like a blind offer.
Well, to me, it sounds like it sounds like an old person who, because people used to put that, right? A lot, right? It sounds like someone who just didn't stop putting it, right? Because the only time you really see assignees in any kind of major way is with a corporation, or because not even LLCs, they don't have subsidiaries. With corporations, you know, they change their mind. We're not going to put it in this one. We're going to put it in this one. But that's mostly where we see them. Although like I said, we've had 3 lately, which were assignees for money, where we had to deal with who's getting paid what and who's returning what deposit. But, you know, it can happen. But, okay, let's move on because the next section is contingencies. And so all the contingency deadlines are here. So I say that, gee, I thought we only had 3. I thought we had a loan and an inspection and an appraisal contingency, and look at all these on here. So clearly there are other contingencies in the agreement, which is why when you're doing even your first contingency removal, you want them to remove all contingencies except maybe the loan and the appraisal, or, you know, whatever the first one they're removing, you want all. So you want to get all these minor ones in here, you know, get rid of them. Which is why we don't just say we're removing the loan, the appraisal, you know, we want to get we want all contingencies. So the loan, obviously,
Now,
defaults to 17 days. If there's no loan contingency and no appraisal, you check the box. Okay, so this is what I've learned from auditing since we've had so many of these. If you check the box, the buyer checks the box, you don't have to talk about it ever again. They don't need a contingency removal. You don't need to counter that there shall be no loan contingency. They check the box. There is no loan contingency. There is no appraisal contingency. We don't have, that's the end of that conversation. We don't want to bring it up again because we don't want to change their mind. We don't want to give them an out like, oh, well, now that you're asking again. So anyway, so just, you know, I see that a lot. And so be really careful. If there is none, if it's the contract says none, you don't need anything else. Now, what I used to see written in contracts, and we'll still see it because it's in the counteroffer, is I see a lot of buyer to remove, this is what they put, buyer to remove appraisal contingency, buyer has 10 days on the inspection and 20 days on the loan, but buyer to remove appraisal contingency. What does that mean? And remove when? Remove with the contract is what it's supposed to mean, but that's not what it says. So if you want someone to remove something, if they didn't check the box and you want no loan contingency, your counteroffer says no loan contingency. There shall be no loan contingency. And that's all. We don't need a contingency removal. We don't need anything else. We just need to say it. Okay. So that's
Cindy, and the first line.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was saying the first line, they put the loan and the appraisal, the default is 17 days. So they put the same. We should change the loan to 21, right?
Correct. Oh, right. They changed the loan. The loan now defaults to 17. You're right. It used to default to 21. They probably found everyone was changing it. So I don't know why. So, but yes, notice that I should have pointed that out, and I will make a bigger deal out of that. The loan
So
is
is the
now,
default now 17 for
Yeah.
all of them?
yes, because yes, for all of
Okay.
them. Well, and
Can
here
you
they are
ask
right
them
here.
to change it back to 21?
Sure, you could. So you can see right here in the middle column, 17 for loan, 17 for appraisal, 17 for investigation of property. Okay, yeah, they made them all the same. Okay. The other thing, and I know a lot of you weren't really aware of this, but in the current contract, paragraph, whatever it is, 17B1 is the 17 days is the investigation contingency. And at the very bottom, then there's a B2 all the way. And at the very last one in the line, there is it says this is how many days they have to actually do inspections on the property. And that got added, 3 or 4 years ago. And I don't think a lot of people are aware of it because I get a lot of phone calls that says, do I have to let them in? And I say, well, what does it say in that paragraph? That's how long they have to get in. So informational access to property means that they have the right to be on the property for their own informational purposes, even if they have no contingency. So if you change, and my feeling is from talking to the agents is nobody wants a buyer doing investigations when the contingencies are removed. We don't want them finding something, even if we get the deposit, we don't want them canceling. We don't want them finding something else. We don't want them in. That's the impression I got. So if that's how you feel, then you make sure that when you change the first one, the 17-day contingency, you change the 17-day informational access. Make them the same. For 10 days, you can knock yourself out. You can do all your reports and stuff, but after that, no. Okay. So they put these together. So now I think people will start realizing that there are two separate things here. And I don't really think that a lot of people were aware of that before. Because nobody ever changed the second 17-day one. Okay, review and the informational access is not really a contingency other than they just have a right to do it. I guess it would be if you didn't let them in, they could cancel because of it. Okay, review of seller documents. So, if this were me, I would put I don't know. I would put how long the seller has to get the documents together with how long you have to review them, but they're in separate places. So review of seller documents, once you get the documents, it again defaults to 17 days. I'm not even sure how this one is different than the inspection contingency, other than it says, or 5 days after receipt, whichever is later. So if you give them a 7-day inspection contingency and you don't get them all the documents till the 6th day, they're going to get 5 more days to review the documents. Okay, and that hasn't changed. That was always the same. Okay, the preliminary title report is accepting the preliminary title report is apparently a contingency. So they have 17 days after acceptance or 5 days after receipt to accept it. I hardly, maybe never have seen contingency removal just for that one, but these are all the same amount of days now, and you may change them all so that they're all different once you get going. But, keep in mind that they kind of have these. And
I thought it was 7 days for the seller to get the documents over, not 17.
It is. We haven't even got to that yet. It hasn't even asked that yet.
Oh.
We aren't. That's why I say those should be together, right? It should say right here, seller has 7 days to get the documents and you have 17 days to do this. And they should be together in my mind.
Yeah.
But it's not. But it does say 7. It just says it later. I agree. There's some things I think they did really well, like putting all the contingencies together. But some things I think that that you have to go, it doesn't make as much sense as it could. Okay. But, I'm sure they tried it every way to Sunday, and this is how it came out best. Okay, preliminary title report, common interest, you have to get them the HOA docs. Review or leased or liened items, if there's any leased or liened items, and including, and notice how they put on here the PACE or HERO liens. Those are the 2 liens that run with the property that stay on the property tax. So they you have to review those, all of that paperwork, and then you have 17 days. Okay, they still have a little thing where you can remove your contingencies. Again, I want to point out, because I think that people maybe didn't quite I didn't quite understand this, so maybe I never really read it all the way through. Okay, this doesn't say I remove my contingencies. it says I remove the ones on the CR that I'm giving you. So if they check the box, but there's no CR, it didn't do anything. I don't like.
I
the way
don't
they-
get what you just said. What are you talking
Okay,
about?
see on the far right, it says removal or waiver of contingency. Any contingency may be removed or waived by checking the applicable box above or attaching a contingency removal. Okay, so you could check the box that there's no such contingency, or you could do a contingency removal. Okay, removal or waiver. Okay, so those are the two choices. And if you're removing your contingencies right now, it's against broker's advice or agent's advice. That's the other thing the contract did. It took out the word broker and uses the word agent now. So remember how everything was broker this and broker that and broker this? Now it's agent, 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 because that's who the public deals with. So basically all they're saying is that if you remove a contingency, you have to either attach a contingency removal form or check the box. And if you do those, it's against our advice.
Okay, can I ask one quick question?
Mhm.
Okay, so each one of these contingencies, does that mean that even though they check on here, you have to keep sending them like 1, 2, 3 different contingency time frame? For example, like they're ready for the appraisal, they have to send one separate one, and then
No, you
or-
could check them all. You could send a notice to perform. If everybody has it, say we don't change it, we just keep them all 17 days.
yeah,
and
17 days, remove everything.
Right, and
Just send
17
one
days,
contingency
yeah,
removal.
has come, we will take the document and it says on there, the notice to perform will say, you must remove the following contingencies, and you'll check all the ones that apply, right? You could, because they're not getting off the hook by doing half.
Okay, perfect.
Right.
And automatically, if they don't sign that day, you still have to send a notice to perform, right?
Correct, you still have to, you always have, well, that would be you always have to send a notice to perform before you can cancel. Both sides.
Right, got it. Okay, thank you.
Right.
Cindy, you said that if we put over there the dates from the beginning, then we don't need the contingency removal. But how about on the home inspection? You do the home inspection, but if you get some repairs, you're gonna have to do a request of repairs. And then you have to wait for agreeing on the removal of contingencies, correct?
Well, you're gonna see that, and this was always in the contract, again, probably stuff most people don't know, that it says in the request for repairs, and I think or maybe it's just in the new one. It says that you have to have, no, it was always in the agreement. Your request for repairs has to be given during your contingency period. You're not supposed to, I mean, what's the point of waiting till you're the end of your contingency period, then asking for repairs? It doesn't give you an extension because you did it late.
Yeah.
You can't make the seller give you an extension because you waited to ask. So there's no extension for a late request. And, as I'm sure most of you probably know, it does say in the RPA that the seller is not required to respond to a request for repairs. You're just, I mean, no one wants to be ignored. So I always tell people, yes, you should respond, but you're not required to. Okay. Where are we? We are common interest. Okay, so that is, okay, and then you'll see the last contingency on the list is sale of buyer's property. Okay, and there are seller contingencies for sale of seller's property too, or purchase of a new one, but this is just for buyer's property. Sale of seller's property is not a contingency, that's what it defaults to, unless checked here. So you have to check the box, it'll bring up the COP. And now there's no more handwriting in what your terms are, just do the COP. And for those of you that don't know, the COP was revised about a year ago or so. And so when you get to it, if you look at it and go, whoa, what is all this? Because it used to be like 1 page and now it's 3. Let me know, just call me in, we'll go over it together, we'll fill it in, okay. Okay, so you must attach the COP, there's no other agreement that will work. Okay, so they say that everything above this was for the buyer. And now the rest of the stuff is more seller stuff. Okay, possession. So now we have possession. It's the same old thing. Only now it defaults. I think, didn't it used to default to 5 p.m. on the day of recordation or on the closing? Now it defaults to upon notice of recordation. So upon the escrow sending you an email that says your transaction has been recorded and closed, then that is when the buyer is supposed to get possession. That's what it defaults to. Okay, so you can change it to 6 p.m. or another time on day of recordation, or you can change it to a date specified in 3M2, which is just the box below it. And so in the box below, you can say close of escrow date if checked below how many, so, who's here? So I totally note that, notice how and we're in M2 in the middle, it says if it's 29 days or fewer, the rent back, or 30 days or fewer. Because those are the two different, documents. One's the seller in possession, and if it's under 29 days, and that is 1 page. If it's over 29 days, they want you to do a full-blown lease. It's called residential lease after sale, but it's just a residential lease. So I'm giving you permission, if it's okay with the other agent, because I had an agent not agree to this, to, if it's not 29, but it's 30 or 31 or 32, to use the 1-page form, because otherwise it's just so onerous. Okay, so that will attach either the SIP or depend on which one you check.
Cindy,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you said that's for the seller to
The seal-
okay, or is
the-
that for the lender?
Okay. This is for the close of escrow date. For how,
No,
I'm sorry, for the time
I'm
of possession, how long if the seller wants to stay after the close of escrow.
Right, and to get that form approved, let's say it's the SIP or whatever, isn't that for the lender to determine if, let's say the
No.
buyer, no?
No, sometimes lenders won't let you rent back for more than a certain amount of time.
Oh, okay,
And so they
okay,
are entitled to know that information, and I haven't seen it for a while, but we have seen ones where the lender, where somebody wants a 90-day rent back and the lender says absolutely not. The most you can
okay,
give
I
is
got
3
you.
weeks, and then we
Okay.
got to deal with it. But
Cindy,
Okay.
for the most part, that's the only way you have to let the lender know what you're going to do, because there's some rent backs that are too long for even them.
Okay, I got you. Thank you.
And I know that, and somebody else probably knows this better than I, but I know that VA and FHA might be those ones where you can't rent back for very long. I think
Yeah,
it's very
you're
short,
right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
30 days VA.
Yeah. So so if you have a VA or FHA loan, you've got to watch that.
I have a quick question on that SIP, Cindy.
Mhm.
So do you feel that's enough protection for the buyer?
Yes. Okay. I didn't mention it, and I guess I should. But in addition to the SIP, the seller in possession, because this means the seller is staying when the buyer owns the property. And sometimes we have a buyer coming on the property prior to the close of escrow. The property is empty. The buyer needs to either store their stuff or move on or make changes, or they're going to do repair, but they're coming on. In both of those circumstances, if we represent the person who is who's the owner, like if the buyer is going to move in early, we represent the seller, or if the seller is going to stay after, if we represent the buyer, I have an agreement that I prepare, like a legal release document, and it says, yeah, we're going to let you stay, but if you do anything, you're going to release us from all claims, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to take care of this and that, and you're going to do this. So that is something I prepared. It's not a form, but it's kind of a form for me. I just have to change it, names and stuff like that in the facts. But so I find that the two together is what I prefer for protection, is that you do the SIP, you do the document, the other document as well, but that you also, if we represent the buyer. Now, sometimes a buyer, this has happened to me probably 3 times. It's the craziest thing if I ask me, but sometimes the other party says, or like the seller will say, sure, buyer, I'll let you move in early, but you have to prepare an indemnity agreement for me. Well, why would I want someone else to prepare my indemnity agreement? I mean, I'll do it, but I don't have any duty to you to make sure that you can come after my client. So I don't do it as well. And I take out some things that I put in for protection of our clients. I mean, it's kind of crazy, but if they won't let us do it without it, then we'll prepare it. But why would, how you don't let that's crazy. Okay. Okay, so that's possession, seller occupied or vacant. So that we did that part. Okay, so the third one in this section is tenant occupied units. If it's occupied, even if it won't, I was told, even if it's not going to be occupied at the closing, you still check it, because we're announcing we have a tenant occupied unit. Okay, then this form comes up called the TOPA. It is a brand new form. I don't know what's on it. It is not out yet. But that comes up, and that's when you have a tenant in possession, that's what you're going to use. I should have started with saying they're getting rid of the, there will be no more probate purchase agreement, and there will be no more oh my gosh, mobile home. No more mobile home purchase agreement. They're just going to be supplements. They're not going to do this for every single thing. They're just going to be supplements. So, and same thing with this. They have a tenant supplement that's going to answer all the tenant questions. And again, this one we'll go over because we'll have to use that a lot. Okay, then the next section is documents, fees, and compliance. Okay, so this is where seller has to deliver the documents in 7 days or change that. Again, make sure that this corresponds with the number that you put above. If we're giving them only 7 days to remove their contingencies, we certainly want to make it so that we get them the documents in 2 days, right? Or with the counteroffer or whatever, because they have to have our documents. Okay. Sign and return escrow holder general provisions, all stuff that was there before in 5 days. Time to pay fees. I think it used to be 3, didn't it? Time to pay fees for ordering HOA docs. Now it defaults to 3 days after acceptance. You're supposed to order the HOA docs. You have to do that. I assume it did that because they know it's taking a long time to get HOA docs now. Some people do them at the listing, and then this isn't a problem if you get them before you even sell. Okay, install smoke alarms, CO2 detectors, water heaters for bracing. Okay, so this is another one of those things where I feel like they should put who pays for it with when you have to do it. I don't know. It's like the same topic in different places. But anyway, so this says that within 7 days of acceptance, 7 days of acceptance, not closing or before the final walkthrough, you have to install smoke alarms, CO2 detectors, and water heater bracing. So you can change that to 30 days or 25 days or whatever if you want, but this doesn't say who pays for it. This just says this has to be done. In the state of California, it is the law that every seller must have their water heater strapped and smoke detectors in all the right places. That is the law in the state of California. The law does not require as a point of sale requirement the CO2 detectors, but we do them. Everybody in real estate does them, and they add them in because, oh my gosh, if they could save a life, but good for us, right? So so they add in the CO2 detectors, and we'll see on the next page. It's going to say who pays for everything.
I was like, can I ask before you go?
Mm-hmm.
If we go back one step there, if I understand this correctly, so with time to actually pay the fees for the HOA, so they're saying that these must be actually paid for within the 3 days after the acceptance,
Because
right?
the HOA isn't going to give you their fees without a check. If you use our escrow, if you are able to use our escrow, you have the seller. The company, we pay the HOA fees up front, and we get paid back at closing.
Okay, I see. And with the smoke alarm, the smoke alarm and the CO detector, so in this case, if it should be done 7 days, then you don't want to do your appraisal before it's done because you don't want the appraisal to have to come back.
Well, because they usually call that out, right.
But then if you do that now, then they're going to charge your buyer twice.
That's
right?
probably why they did this. There was never a date on installing these. It's probably why they did this.
Okay.
That would be my guess. I think honestly, in another couple of 5 years or so, every house is going to have them. We're not going to maybe see so many needs for those, but I know right now that's not the case. Okay, top of the next page is our paragraph about what's included and what's not included. Okay, so this is to me weirdly out of place because it doesn't go with the whole explanation of what's already included and the whole, which is now in paragraph 9. So it really has to be done in connection with paragraph 9. But you'll see they've added, these are all items that the buyer wants to be included. They've added the video doorbells, the security cameras, wall-mounted brackets for video component equipment or audio equipment. They've added a lot of stuff to this. So if you represent the buyer, look at, they added wine refrigerator, microwave. Clearly you are entitled without checking the box to anything that's a fixture. But if you don't want to fight about whether something's a fixture or not, just check the box. Okay. So yeah, we've always had this issue with stoves. No, you don't want to represent the buyer on the one house that had a rollout stove and they took it because you're going to be buying the buyer a stove. You know, when I first worked here, we were buying those things all the time. We don't do that. At least I don't hear about it. So anyway, so you might always want to check stove if they want these other things. Clearly, refrigerators are not usually built in. Wine refrigerator could be built in, right? Or not. So if you want to check it, because there's no reason not to check it just because you think it's built in. That's what I'm saying. Same thing with the microwave. And you're going to see when you get to the section 9, they made a thing about microwaves that if there's a cutout for the microwave, then it goes with the property, even though the microwave could be picked up off the cutoff and taken away. If they made a space for it, like it's built, the space is built in, that's good enough. They've changed it quite a bit. Okay. The next section is and then of course you can add anything you want or exclude anything you want here.
Cindy, I just want to make sure I got lost a little bit. So if there's a cutout area for the microwave has to stay with the property?
Yeah, we're going to get to that when we do the whole rest of the
Oh,
agreement. I don't know if we're going to have to, I don't know. I don't know. But yes, they changed the way that the way they changed the wording on that. They took a little thing and it's now like 3/4 of a page.
Cindy, but
Yeah.
we still have to do the transfer disclosure. So this will be like a duplicate of the transfer disclosure, right?
No, these are
Because in the transfer disclosure,
the transfer disclosure statement says what's on the property, not what goes with the property. This is what they actually are leaving. So you could put you have a microwave on your transfer disclosure statement, but if it's just sitting on the countertop, it doesn't go with the property. I've had that argument with people. They never read that part that says these are the items that are physically today on the property.
This is
so
for
this
the
is
buyer.
the buyer. The buyer doesn't know what's staying and what's goes. So when they make the offer, they need to put it there first.
Well, that's what I mean. You can read paragraph 9, and paragraph 9 tells you all the stuff that stays and all the stuff that doesn't go. But these are extra things that are not clear, or in some cases, in some properties are not clear. So if there's any question, just check the box. You know, do we really want to rely on the fact that we think that microwave thing is built into the wall? And so, you know, why not check the box? I mean, it's just, you're going through this grid thing and, you know, you just, you want this, you want this, you want this. I don't think I don't know. I mean, I've only had one seller once that was really insulted.
I think
Someone
when
asked
you,
for something because she felt like the MLS told what we were offering, and then how dare they ask for something else? And you can't explain to her that we do, you know, thousands of these transactions and everybody does this, but she, how rude they are. So it just depends. Okay.
So I just want to clarify, this is actually a list that of all the things that are excluded, unless you say they are included by checking a box.
Correct, except if they are actually built in, they're going to go anyway. If you have a built-in stove, you can't take it, whether you check the box or not. But for the things that are not built in, correct, they do not go with the property unless the box is checked.
Cindy, am I correct to say that this is an RPA, meaning we're writing this as an offer?
correct.
So obviously, the seller can counter.
Right,
that
exactly.
item that is
And
not
again,
included.
I don't think sellers, other than my one weird person, they don't think they get offended because you ask for the refrigerator.
Yeah,
They
exactly.
say, no, I'm sorry, it doesn't go with the property. I'm telling you, she kept saying over and over again, I didn't offer that in the MLS. I don't know why they're asking for that. And it's just like you try, you know, it's like everyday normal, but okay.
It's an offer.
But yeah, so I don't think you have to
it's
worry
like
about that.
it's like the
This
the
is
washer
that
and
same
dryer.
little
That's
thing that used to be at the end of the paragraph, that used to be in the paragraph, but they beefed it up. It used to be a lot shorter.
Cindy, can I ask this one other question? Okay, I know that whatever's attached to the house, but I have an instance where in the kitchen, you know how they have like a hanging, like a rack that hangs from the ceiling, then you hang your pots and pans on. I thought that thing stayed with the house and I didn't put it in, but when my buyer
They
moved
took
in,
it.
the damn thing.
Yeah,
thing was taken
again,
out.
I think so too. I think that if it's attached to the ceiling, they would have had to have left it. They should have left it.
Okay.
But
see,
again, you know, if you see stuff like that and you're worried, I mean,
Put
they
it
might have
down.
known all along
That's
they were
what I
going to take
learned.
it. If you had asked for it, they would have told you right up front. So,
I didn't know.
you know, try to err on the side of asking for stuff, because people get very, like I always say this, to me, when you're buying $1 million property, this is so minor, but people get very upset about these things. So nobody thinks this is, oh, well, it's a refrigerator on a $1 million house. What's, so we'll buy a refrigerator. They don't think like that. And I don't blame them. I probably wouldn't either. But I'm just saying it's that people are crazy about the personal property. Okay, let's go on to allocation of costs. So this section is where you decide who's paying for what. Okay, so who's paying for the natural hazard? And then they give you 2 blanks. So if you want to write something in, there's nothing in here for termite. There's nothing in here for septic. If you decide you want a septic report, they give you a couple of places where you can fill that in right here. You do not need to put reports that your buyer is paying for. This is for the buyer to tell the seller what the seller has to pay for. So there's no reason, and I always thought this, but the car attorney said it too, no reason to put buyer to pay for a home inspection. You just don't need to pigeonhole your, but then if they decide not to, you just don't need to do it. So it's really all about what the seller's paying for or what you're both paying for. Okay, so the natural hazard, then the 2 blanks, the smoke alarms. So now it's going to tell you who's paying for these things. So you could have the buyer pay for them, but they still have to be installed by the close of escrow. Okay, government. Okay, so the 2 government ones, we used to have all that whole little list there. Government required point of sale inspection reports. So that would be a city report that's required at the time of sale. So this is your city report. If you have one of those, something has to be checked. The one, but again, this is inspection report. The one below it is corrective remedial actions. So your report comes back and it says you have a room built not to code and it has to come down. Well, I agreed that seller would pay for the report, but seller agreed said that buyer should pay for the corrective actions. And honest to goodness, I thought the laws in these cities said who had to pay for them. So I didn't know we could reallocate them like this. Honestly, I didn't, but I guess we can. So, so this, I like this. They took out the other stuff and that's all they left was the point of sale reports, the city reports. Okay. Escrow fees, obviously it's pretty much the same. Everyone used to write in all kinds of weird stuff. So I'm happy there's no blank there. I mean, I guess unless both, but what you always want to check each to pay their own. I don't know. I can't tell from looking at this until we start using it if you have to check buyer, seller, and then each to pay their own, or if each to pay their own automatically obviously assumes that that's both, right? So
but Cindy, if somebody wants to pay, the buyer, the seller wants to pay their own, we don't have to always put each to pay their own.
As opposed to putting what?
As opposed to just checking the box that says buyer or seller. I mean, we can say,
well, you're going to check the both box, right? And then you're going to have to write, people are going to write 50-50, or in the old, before this, they'd write 50-50 or each to pay their own. Or maybe you don't have to write anything, right? Or maybe it assumes 50-50. The reason we sometimes do each to pay their own is if you get a client, it would have to be your seller. If you get a seller who, let's just say the seller, you get the seller and you go to put it into our escrow and the seller says, hey, last time I sold the property, I used this escrow. They only charged me this much money. I want to use my escrow. Well, we'll say, hey, seller, we'll meet that price. And so if it, shoot, I lost my train of thought. So we'll meet that price. Well, if you have 50-50 and one party's getting a discount, you have to put the whole thing into the pot and split it in half. But if it says each to pay their own, then the seller gets a discount and the buyer pays full price. So that's why we use each to pay their own. I don't know if any of you are the culprits that were writing usual and customary, but there's no place to write that. Don't write that. Please don't write that. There is nothing that's usual and customary in our industry anymore. I mean, not really. Okay.
Hey, Cindy.
Yeah.
Cindy, and in regards to when you have a city, let's say a SUSA, they have a city request report before the close of escrow. That is actually the city inspector. They had to check the property before we close. If there is a repair, in that case, the seller is responsible. It's not the buyer, correct?
Well, this
if the city requests a modification.
Well, Q6 gives you the right to allocate it to the buyer or the seller. Yeah, I think the law says that the seller is supposed to make the correction. I think it does in most cases. But you can, I mean, it's the same thing. The law says that the seller has to do the make sure that the smoke detectors and the stuff is done, but it doesn't say they have to pay for it. You can allocate payment however you want.
Well, the thing is, if the city doesn't give you the okay, then you cannot close escrow, right?
Technically, yes. But some,
Yeah,
you know,
because
there's
in
sometimes where
Azusa, San
there
Gabriel,
are a few cities that have declarations where somebody can sign a declaration and the buyer, and that they'll take care of this after the close of, there are cities that will allow that. I'm not sure about LA, but other cities. Okay, escrow fees, owner's title insurance policy. I don't know, this is crazy, and he really harped on it, but I'm just gonna say it once. If buyer pays any portion of the owner's title insurance policy, buyer is entitled to pick the carrier, the title company, the insurance company. So normally sellers pay this anyway, but that's the law, that if buyer pays it, then they get to pick who you use. Just telling you. Okay, and then it gives you a place on the right to put the title company in if you're the buyer, if you want to. Buyer lender title insurance policy, buyer has to pay that. I think it says that in several places in here. County transfer tax fees, it gives you, in the city taxes, it gives you a chance to fill those in.
One
If
quick
it's city tax and nobody's paying it, just leave it blank.
Cindy, for as far as like, the title and escrow and all that, you know how you write seller's choice? Do you still use that same thing, or because I'm seeing some company use the name as seller's choice?
I'm kind of surprised they didn't put that in here. I see sellers counter all the time. Seller shall choose all services.
Okay, so when we're writing an offer, we can put seller's choice of service.
You could, I'm not sure where I guess you could put it down here under other terms, seller's choice as to all services. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There's not a lot of places, with blanks where you can fill stuff in on this. Okay, so these are again all the fees. The HOA fees are all on here. Private transfer fee, if there is one. That's it. They give you 2 more empty spots for fees and costs. So if you put something on the other page, like on the other page, you put where you could fill in those 2 blanks.
Termite, right?
Where was that? It was, remember they gave us 2 blanks to fill in? I can't find it now, but for reports.
Q16 and Q17.
Yeah,
What is
16
it?
and 17, Q16 and 17.
Okay. Okay, well, this is for cost. This is who pays. But there's another one who has to do the reports. Remember where I said you could put in the termite report? Never can find that one again. Anyway, if you fill that in and you put in, where is that?
Wouldn't that be Q2?
Q1.
Oh, maybe I thought it was
Q1.
Oh yeah, here we go. Q2, all of Q2, like say in Q2, you put termite report.
Got it.
Right.
So I guess if you check seller pays for it, you don't have to put that in here again. But yeah. So anyway, if there's anything, this is where you would put in if there's any other fees or costs that you want somebody to pay for.
So
if you
Q2, you write termite, and then Q16, 17, you say for section 1 or 2, depend.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Or but you could put the whole thing in up there. Yeah.
You write
It depends. As long as it's on here somewhere. If you can't figure it out, put it under other terms. I don't care. As long as it's on the paper, it doesn't matter if it's in the right box.
Cindy, can you explain a little bit about private terms? Private
transfer
transfers.
fees.
Mhm.
The reason you don't know is because we don't have any. If I see a private transfer fee once a year, there might be some. We sell some things that are I can't remember what they're called, but where they're all owned kind of by the whole and you have to transfer it through it doesn't transfer. You don't actually get title. You only own a portion through I can't remember what they're called. But
In a co-op. In a co-op.
Yeah, the co-op idea.
I see.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so if you have something like that, then sometimes you might have a private transfer fee.
Can it also be like, for example, if you're buying like in Seal Beach, some areas, I think it's Seal Beach, where you're buying the condo, but the condo is on leased land?
Yeah, something like that. That might have a private transfer fee, right? But you don't see them on a regular kind of sale, right? I never, at least I don't see them filled in very much.
Yeah, so Cindy, I ran into some a while back down, I think it was Ladera Ranch or something. It was the area of the hills east of San Juan Capistrano, and those private transfer fees were really nasty. And
Terrible housing.
I was working with a seller at the time, and it was when, the market was really bad, and it was in the thousands of dollars, and it went back to the original builder or something.
Right, that's right, exactly. We don't see those very much, but we do see them once in a while.
But they were
And it used to be that people would always write in, maybe seller to pay if applicable. I don't think there's anywhere to write those little comments anymore, which I'm glad, because it didn't really mean anything. Obviously, if it's not applicable, they don't have to pay it. So they took out a lot of there's all these little comments, and you're never quite sure what they mean.
Is there any mention of Melrose on here?
I don't know. I don't think so. It might be in the contract itself, but there's no deadline or amount of, there's nothing like that. I mean, I'm sure there is in the contract itself. Okay, so.
Other terms.
What?
Just put it in other terms.
Everything, right?
Yeah.
Have to pay fees in order HOA, install. Okay. Am I missing
Hey,
something?
Cindy, look like there is a lot of stuff over here that needs to be filled out. So now when we represent the seller most of the time, and we got all these agents that are not taking this training, and they are going to probably send these offers all incomplete, we're going to have to come back and counter, because
Maybe.
obviously there's a lot of people that won't fill this up,
But I feel like the opposite. I feel like where maybe that used to happen, now it's just right here in front of you. All you have to do is take pages 1, 2, and 3, even if you don't discuss anything else with your client, and get them filled out. I mean, just check by check, you know what I mean?
I agree. I think this is so much cleaner. You can see 1, 2, and 3 right in the front instead of having to flip through a bunch of pages.
Right. I think there's more chance that we're going to get stuff filled out than losing, like the other contract that, the blanks were in the middle of paragraphs. People didn't see them.
Well, what the question was, if they are not completing it correctly like we wanted, we got to send them back, right? And tell them just to read.
It's just like although people didn't do it, but in my auditing, you know how many times some people ask for fill in the home warranty thing, but don't check buyer or seller? Well, yeah, it's just like in that contract, somebody forgot to check who's paying for it. We have to do an addendum. Same thing here. If there's any questions they didn't answer that need to be answered, then we would have to do an addendum, or in a counter offer, whichever one works. But let's I know I only have a half hour to do the whole rest of the document. That's going to be kind of crazy, so I'm going to try to go really fast. Okay, going up to paragraph 4, property addendum type. So now it gives you all these choices, and it tells you, if you have a probate, a manufactured home, then you check that, and these documents come up that you need. So there's no more probate agreement, no more manufactured home agreement. You just check this box, and it brings up, which makes sense to me, because 90% of it is, or 95% is the same. And then it just asks the probate questions, or just asks the questions for the manufactured homes. Okay. If you're adding any addendum to your contract, here's where you put it in. Addendum number 1. I'm adding it. If you're adding a short sale, this was all here before. Okay, septic well, all of those. If you're asking for any of those things, this is where you do it. Buyer or seller advisories, it's pretty much the same. We always had the advisories. Again, if you'll notice that statewide is not automatically checked. It's required in every single file, but I've never had a buyer balk at it because we don't check it in the contract. But we always need a statewide if you are so inclined to check that box. Okay. Additional terms affecting the purchase price. Okay, so this tells you, it doesn't tell you how much the deposit is. It just tells you all the information about the deposit. Of course, deposits, now all money going to escrow is all defaults to wired to escrow, everything. So if you're wiring, you don't have to ever do anything or write anything. Because here it says here, if a method other than wire transfer is specified in paragraph 3D, so you would have had to specify another method. And then it also says, if the method that you choose is unacceptable to the escrow holder, then you have to do it the way the escrow holder tells you to do it. How about that? Again, it's not something we ever had an issue with, but I guess because we accept pretty much most things. But obviously someone must have, or they wouldn't have added that, right? That's how I feel. Okay. So we got that. We got the deposit, increased deposit, same old, same old. Retention of deposit. I don't think buyer and seller advised to consult with attorney before any clause specifying the remedy. Yeah. So retention of the deposit is the liquidated damages clause. Paragraph 29, if initial is, and it's still there in paragraph 29, it's not up here, but it talks about the liquidated damages clause. Okay, if it's an all cash offer, it says so in paragraph 3A, and no loan is needed, there's no loan contingency. Okay, the loan, same thing, it defaults to conventional financing. So if you're having conventional financing, you don't have to say anything. And again, if you were going to say it, it's not going to be here, it's going to be in the grid. Or paragraph 3, whatever we want to call it.
Cindy, on the retention of deposit, we just got to explain that because the people don't comply with the contingencies doesn't mean they lose the deposit automatically. They
Correct.
still
And
require
when you get
mutual.
to, it's no longer paragraph 14. I can't remember what paragraph it is, but when we get to that, it says that right in there. The only situation that the contract addresses as far as deposit is if a seller cancels because the buyer refuses to remove a contingency, then the buyer gets their deposit back. Any other circumstance, it doesn't cover, but it covers that one, which also makes no sense to me since it still seems like a breach, but okay. Okay, so we did financing or limits. Okay, so yeah, I mean, most of it's pretty much the same. Deliver seller written notice, curve form. That's all you pay for. So if there are lender requirements that buyer, so you're getting an FHA loan and the lender gives you requirements. It says here, buyer shall within the time specified in 3E1, and I'm not sure which one that is, to deliver to seller written notice, and it has 2 different forms, of any lender requirements that buyer requests seller to pay for or otherwise correct, or that there are no lender requirements. So that it says one, it gives you both choices. So if you have an FHA or a VA loan, that's going to be a new document that we're going to start using, which is either the RR or the AEA. And once they come out, we'll decide why we're going to use which one. Okay, balance of purchase price, limits on credits to buyers, that really hasn't changed. I feel like this is my chance to even teach what hasn't changed for those people that don't know it, but I don't have time for that. So, okay, additional financing terms, pretty much the same. Nothing much changed. Number 7, closing and possession. Okay, so occupancy now it's in paragraph 3E, number 3, and it tells you that. So if you get here and you're like, oh my gosh, we don't know what that is, it tells you where to find it. Okay, this is where it says the property shall be delivered as is in its present physical condition as of the date of acceptance. And then this is new, and the property, including pool, spa, landscaping, and grounds, is to be maintained in substantially the same condition as on the date of acceptance. That was the law, but I don't think it said it quite so clearly. All debris and personal property not included in the sale shall be removed by close of escrow or at the time possession is delivered to buyer. Whoa, here, seller, you got to remove everything. If not, on the same date, if items are not removed when possession is delivered to buyer, all items shall be deemed abandoned. Buyer, after first delivering to seller written notice to remove the items within 3 days, may pay to have such items removed or disposed of and may bring legal action against the seller to pay for it. I haven't ever really heard of sellers leave. I mean, they leave trash, but of sellers leaving anything that they would want to come back for. But again, it looks like we now have to give notice before we can destroy it. So maybe your notice just says you left a lot of trash or have 3 days to come get rid of it, or we're gonna get rid of it and sue you. Anyway, that's new. Okay.
Cindy,
yeah.
when you buy it, a repo or something, and the pool is already green, when you go buying because nothing is being done, it still there has to be delivered clean, or
No,
they can
in
be
the same
delivered green.
condition. That's why these people, they go, oh, there's mold. You have to fix that. Well, no, I don't have to fix it. The mold didn't probably come since we opened escrow. It has to be in the same condition it was at the time you opened escrow. So if your pool was green, that's what they bought it. They bought a green pool.
Okay.
There's I think that some people get confused. There is no duty of sellers other than things like water heaters and the things that are required by law to make any repairs to property, not health and safety repairs, not any repairs, as long as they disclose it. So we just closed an escrow where the buyer found mold and she wanted the seller to pay for it, and the seller doesn't have to. So all the seller has to do is disclose, and of course we already had the mold report, that there is mold and I'm not paying for it because as far as I can tell, it's been here forever, I guess. So, and I didn't know about it. So you don't have to pay for anything. I think some people really think that you have to pay for health and safety stuff. And I don't know if that used to be the law. Okay, very soon. Okay. The seller remaining in possession. Again, it's if the seller is going to have the right to remain in possession, we're going to do the right documents. All the timeframes are up on the front on 3M2. So this says, and then they made it clear this time, they added some language that makes it very clear. Seller shall, on close of escrow, unless otherwise agreed, and even if seller remains in possession, provide keys, passwords, codes, and means to operate all locks, mailboxes, security systems, alarms, etc., to the buyer. So just because there's a rent back doesn't mean that you don't have to do that. So you still have to do it at the close of escrow. So if you don't want to do that, you are going to have to make a note of that somewhere in something in writing. Either the seller will counter that all all documents to be delivered per paragraph 7E shall be delivered at the end of seller's rent back. Something like that. But but again, it's requiring you to you're going to have to deal with that if you don't want to go. I have a lot of, I would think that this would be a paragraph I didn't know about, but I've had a lot of issues with buyers wanting keys when seller's still in possession. And so you've got to deal with that. If it's going to be a big issue for your seller to give their keys away, then you've got to counter that out. Okay. Contingencies and removal of contingencies. We saw the removal paragraphs up in number 3. Buyer's advised to investigate. That's pretty much it. Okay. No loan contingency. If there's no loan, what does it mean? Appraisal. Okay. On a written appraisal of the property unless the amount is out. Okay. So apparently, this is also a problem I was not aware of, but apparently is a problem. Is some people have their appraisal and the appraiser gives them the square footage and it's not the same as what they had seen before. And so they want to cancel based on this disclosure of new square footage. Again, I have never heard of that situation. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen and I don't know about it, but so they've changed the appraisal to, they've kind of changed it. So that basically what they say in here is, how they used to have this agreement that says that if you have no appraisal contingency, you can't use your loan contingency because your appraisal didn't come in. Well, they're basically saying that even though you have an appraisal contingency and they put an extra piece in like square footage, you can't use that to cancel. It's not hard. You can't use it. You can't use your appraisal contingency to cancel. That's what I mean to say. So basically, if you have already released your appraisal, you still have your appraisal contingency, but you have no inspection contingency. So you've already removed it. The appraiser says the square footage is different. You can't use that information to cancel on your appraisal contingency just because it's on the appraisal, because it's not the appraisal. Okay, that's what that's trying to say. Okay, your seller documents. Okay, title. Yeah, so it's been.
So when are you supposed to be able to deal with that if they find out that the size of it is not the same size? When should you have done that?
Well, okay, so yeah, so if I mean, you can go back and you can say to them, hey, here's what the appraiser says. Where do you get your number, right? I mean, I would always want to know where the seller's getting their number because there's so many different places we get it from. And then you go from there. Why are they saying this and you're saying this? What's going on here? And so it could be a misrepresentation by the buyer, right? I mean, by the seller, if they oversold their property, like added 200 square feet to it or something, and now you find out it's not. But it's not. It's all they're saying is you can't use the appraisal contingency for that. It doesn't mean it's not going to be a problem. It's just that you can't just because it's on the appraisal. It's not part of the appraisal contingency.
So you can cancel because you can say, well, you lied. Is that?
Well, yeah. But again, just because the appraiser says this and and the tax rolls say this, and the, this one says that, unless you do, who knows what's right? Because you can find 3 different square footages if you look hard enough. So yeah, maybe you can cancel if correct. Obviously, if they misrepresented you could cancel. Yes. But you can't use the appraisal contingency. Okay. Investigation of property. Okay. And any other matters affecting the property, title or revised title, 5 days from receipt. Oh, I received a preliminary title report. Yeah. Okay. 5 days to revisit, to view. Okay, at the top of the next page of page 6 says buyer has 5 days after receipt to review a revised preliminary report. So if it changes, then they have 5 days to review it and accept it. Okay, condominium plans, pretty much the same stuff. Buyer review of leased or liened items contingency. So this is new. I'm sure there was no contingency for review of leased or liened items before. So this is where they throw in these extra contingencies. It is a contingency of the agreement. It's in paragraph 3L7, which we know is probably 17 days because they all are. So you have to disclose to someone whether or not you have something leased or liened, and you have to give them all the paperwork. And they can cancel if they, let's just say that you have solar paneling and the buyer has been asking and asking for the solar contract, and finally you're going to get a notice to perform because the contract says you have to give this to me. And then the buyer can cancel. And nobody wants a buyer to cancel, although most buyers don't want to cancel either. But still, we need to get those done in the timeframes that the contract says. Okay, removal or waiver of contingencies with offer. We obviously don't ever recommend that. The next changes are down to paragraph. So paragraph 9 is included and excluded from the sale. This is the one we were talking about a little bit before. So now, but now it says, okay, existing electrical, mechanical, ceiling fans, logs and grates, all that was there before, and appliances for which special openings or encasements have been made. So I think that would even include the stove, right? Because you've got a special place for the stove. It's not like it just sits in the middle of the floor. But that's what it says now. It says appliances for which special openings or encasements have been made, whether or not checked in paragraph 3P. So if you have a spot for the microwave that's kind of built into the countertop, even though the microwave is not a fixture, you would still have to leave it. Okay. Light bulbs, including smart bulbs. I don't think that was on here before. Excluded. Okay, home automation. They have a whole section on home automation, smart home features. I'm not going to go through all of this because it's tedious and we have a lot. But you should read this. This paragraph 9 included it. You should all read. You should all read this. It now also defaults. I think they changed the default. So they default on the bottom. It used to default to you had to check a box if you were going to remove the things in the wall, and it said you have to, if you remove them, you have to fill in the hole but not paint it. It used to be that if you check the box, which hardly anyone ever did. Now it defaults to unless or otherwise specified, brackets attached to walls, floors, or ceilings for any component, furniture, or item will be removed, and holes or other damages shall be repaired but not painted. So now that's what it defaults to, is that you have to remove those things and patch them in and putty them in, whatever you do. Okay. I just can't talk fast enough. Who's to pay for the inspection? Allocation.
Hey, Cindy,
yeah.
Cindy, if they replace the chandelier because it's personal, they have to put another one there?
If they replace what?
A chandelier, a light fixture,
Yeah.
or something.
Do they have to? No. If the first time I go in, if the day I make the offer on this house, there's no chandelier in the front, then there's no chandelier. But,
no, sometimes they have one. They say there is a family thing and it's a memory for the family. They replace
that's
it.
up to the seller. So the seller will counter chandelier, the chandelier does not go with the property. And then you'll say seller will not replace, or seller will replace with something else.
You have to put it now. It's not automatically anymore.
I honestly think that it's a matter of agreement.
Okay.
I don't think there's a law that says that if you decide you want your chandelier, you have to replace it, unless that's your agreement with the buyer, or unless you forgot to exclude it and somewhere during the transaction, you're like, oh my gosh, I really want to take my chandelier. Would you guys be okay if I replaced it, right? But yeah, I mean, I think if you know it from the beginning, you can counter whatever you want. You know, it's a seller's market, right? But yeah, I would, if I had a client who wanted to keep a light fixture like that, I would take it down before you showed the property and put something else up. And we just had this happen, right? That's what I suggested. And they said, well, we don't want to take it down. It makes the property look so nice. But you're not
Yes.
selling it with the property. So well, you want them to fall in love with it and then turn around and slap them in the face? And
Well,
say,
the thing is, you know, you don't want to leave a hole there. They take it out.
right. So I would replace it with something else. Right. Exactly.
Right.
But by the same token, you know, you don't want them to fall in love with it and then say, okay, well, you don't get the chandelier. So anyway, that's just my thought, but I don't always think like other buyers. So I get that. Okay. Point of sale. It has a new section on point of sale requirements. I don't think that was ever in here before. That you have to do the point of sale requirements at their point of sale. And we already saw who pays for those and what those were upfront. Okay. Reinspection fees. That's new. If any repair is not completed within the time specified and the lender requires an additional inspection to be made, seller shall be responsible for all corresponding inspection fee, for any corresponding inspection fee. If buyer incurs costs to comply with lender requirements concerning those items, seller shall be responsible for those costs. So there you go. That's paragraph 10B3. Yeah, where he highlighted. So that's important. That's new. Okay. So if you're the seller and you know they come in, they bring, you know, you have the contract says 7 days to get the smoke detectors up, and their appraiser comes on day 10 and there's no smoke detectors and they have to come back. Seller, you're going to be paying for that return visit. So that you need to know that because that's important. Okay.
Cindy, is there a list of all the items that have to get done? Like, for example, water heater has to be strapped twice, carbon monoxide, smoke detectors.
Well, the things that are required by law are all in the front. That's all there. There aren't very many required by law things. It's what's required by this contract that makes that, you know, that you have to write, that you're going to have to make a list. But most of the stuff is in the grid. There's a few things in here. I mean, this is just telling you that. That's not, doesn't it make sense that the seller should have to pay if they didn't do what they were supposed to do on time? Right?
Well, sometimes if I have, for example, the appraiser might call, or yeah, the appraiser might call, like, for example, the fascia needs to be, you know, it's peeling off and that needs to be.
Yeah, that's different. That's not something we already agreed you were going to repair.
I see.
Right. That would be different, right? That's if the seller hasn't done something that they had agreed to do ahead of time. Okay, home warranty is the home warranty. Statutory rights, it's the same stuff. You know, you guys all should be aware. The TDS, the NHD, the FHDS, the AVID, and the lead disclosure required by law. 5 documents required in every transaction. Well, not really, because the lead-based paint is only required if the property was built 77 or before. So they're not actually required. And the fire home hardening is only required if you're technically by law, if you're in a high fire area. So, but those are the documents they have to be in every file. There is a law that says until the buyer gets until 5 days after the buyer gets these 5 documents, the buyer can cancel and get their deposit back no matter what else the contract says. So they waive all contingencies up front. You don't give them the TDS. You just don't give it right away. Finally, you give it on, you know, in the middle of the transaction, and they have 5 days to cancel. They have up to 5 days after they receive those documents, the TDS, the 5 I said. So be really careful about that. Okay. Home fire hardening, we know about defensible space. This just describes the different documents. Tells you that you can't waive those 5 documents. The waiver is even if you waive them, it doesn't mean anything. Termination rights, other disclosures, anything in here to talk about buyer shall have the right to terminate this agreement. Yeah. So the termination rights, they get the right to terminate the agreement 5 days after delivery of a late disclosure by the seller. Okay, withholding tax, it's pretty much what it is. Megan's Law, this stuff is all pretty much the same as it was in the other, except for that it takes out like natural, you know, it just explains all of these things. You should be able to do that. Paragraph 12 is, is this paragraph 14? No. Oh, paragraph 14, still paragraph 14? Yeah, it is. How about that? Okay, paragraph 12 is, I don't know, it doesn't have a lot of changes in it, particularly zoning. If B discovers something, no, if I do right. Oh, this is supposed to say, and I'm gonna have to do a little more research on this because it was a little bit odd for me, is that if the buyer removes their contingencies and finds something after that, it doesn't count as a late disclosure. So in our case, in our other case where the buyer removed her contingencies and then found the mold, she decided to do her own mold testing. There wasn't even anything that showed that there might be mold actually. She just thought she saw it and she did it and she says she found some. So those things don't give the 5-day right of cancellation. I'm gonna have to go over this paragraph 12. I think it's a little more complicated and I don't feel I have the time to do it right now justice. We'll probably do it on a Monday class. Seller shall within, okay, title investing, so information to clear title. Pretty much the same old stuff. If you have to do what you have to do, buyer's a legal entity. Yeah, it tells you when you're exempt from certain things. Yeah, and all your tax stuff, which is makes me break out. Okay, let's go to paragraph 14. There's not a bunch of changes in paragraph 14. It's pretty much the same as it was before. Other than you can see it keeps referring to paragraph 3 all over the place in terms of, but it's the same thing. It's you have to do this, we have to review, we have the right to cancel. Paragraph 13C, that's the same. If the buyer still has contingencies, the seller has to give the deposit back. They did first deliver to buyer notice to perform. You still have to do a notice to perform, you still have to do a demand to close. Those things haven't changed. Buyer right to cancel, notice buyer seller to perform, still in 5 days, yeah. Oh, they did add on the bottom of notice to buyer or seller to perform, and we do have this problem now and then. If a notice to buyer to perform or notice to seller to perform is incorrectly delivered or specifies a time less than the agreed time, the notice shall be deemed invalid and void. So now you don't have to worry if they, because we know what happens is agents, they look at the form and it says 2 days and they go, I don't want 2 days, and they make it 1. Well, it says 2 in the contract. If you didn't change it to 1 in the contract, you can't change it to 1 on the form. So the form is, if you change it to 1, it's just void. You know, we never knew. What do you do, Jared? So now it just tells you right here it's void. Okay. Okay. Let's keep going. Let's see our repairs. Completed. Final verification. That didn't really change. You don't have a right to cancel just because they didn't do a final verification. But it always said that not subject to, it's not a contingency of the agreement. Okay, repairs. So repairs shall be completed before the final verification. That was always the rule. They have to be performed in a good, skillful manner. Buyer acknowledges that exact restoration and appearance or cosmetic items following all repairs may not be possible. And it says here that when seller does repairs, they have to give invoices and provide copies of invoices and any written statements they get. And I don't know if we're getting those. I have never heard of, to my knowledge, we aren't, but again, I guess it's because they're not in the file. That's why I know we're not getting them. But you're supposed to. You know, if you ever need one, you can always point to the section in the agreement, right? Okay.
Hey, Cindy,
yeah.
The only time that the buyer can get their deposit back without the seller's signature is if the seller does not comply with the dates. That would be the only time.
Oh, you mean
for escrow? I'm talking for escrow.
Yeah. If the seller doesn't give you a disclosure they're supposed to give you, you know, there's places where it says seller shall, you know, give the following disclosures. Yes, you can send a notice to perform, and if they don't get it, if you still don't get it, you can cancel.
So escrow will have the okay to give the money without the seller's signature, right?
No, there's
escrow
no cancellations without sellers, escrow cannot release money without 2 signatures, ever, except on that, and I don't know if, I assume it's still in here, it's way at the bottom of the old agreement, there was that section that said, or maybe it was at the bottom of paragraph 14, that basically says that, that say the buyer wants their deposit back and the seller's not giving it, and they've already sent a cancellation. They can send to escrow a form that says, escrow, I demand you give me my deposit, or I give me the deposit. Escrow has a duty to send that demand to the other side.
Yeah, but if they don't sign, it's still the same thing.
Right, and if they don't sign, if they don't agree, if they write back and if they send an email and say, I don't agree, then we're still stuck with holding the deposit. If they don't respond at all, then escrow can release the deposit.
So even
How
though
many
the
times have I
seller,
seen that happen? None.
I see.
Or one,
Even though
actually,
the
but we ended
seller,
up selling it to them.
but even though the seller does not give you the reports and time and whatever, it's still for the money to get back to the buyers in case the cancellation is still require the seller's signature. Otherwise, the escrow won't release it.
Correct. The cancellation document is one party can cancel a contract. Unilateral, the top parties can be unilateral. Buyer cancels this contract for this reason or no reason. Maybe in breach, maybe not. The bottom part, which cancels escrow, has to be signed by both parties because escrow can't release money without the signature of both parties or a court order. So, yeah, which is why we have so much money in escrow. Okay, nothing's really changed on any of this stuff. Broker and agents compensation. Compensation never, ever, ever, ever belongs in the RPA or a counteroffer in the whole RPA scheme. Never. The RPA is between the buyer and seller. The compensation is between the seller and the listing agent, or the listing agent and the selling agent. The buyer has nothing to do with nothing, and they cannot agree. And I see more addendums and more amendments where the buyer and seller agree that the agent will contribute some money. The agent doesn't sign it, just the buyer and seller. As far as I know, two people can't get together and agree that I'm going to contribute money without me agreeing. So, be careful on those. The response, what you're supposed to do is call escrow and say, escrow, draft an amended escrow instruction. And they will draft an amended escrow instruction for me to sign, because that's who has to sign it, not the buyer and the seller. But they made a big deal about don't ever try to negotiate compensation in this. Okay, the rest of it, I see I marked as brand new, paragraph 19E on page 12. Buyer and seller acknowledge that escrow holder will require invoices for expenses under this agreement. Buyer and seller, upon request by escrow holder within 3 days or within a sufficient time to close escrow, whichever is sooner, shall provide any invoices to escrow holder. That's really interesting, because I keep getting these escrow holders now that want me to send them an invoice. And so I think maybe that's why they added this. Maybe escrow wanted this in there. I don't know. So it looks like if they want an invoice for the commission, that's crazy, right? But anyway, that's new. Multiple listing service, authorized to report to the MLS. Yeah. Collectively images. Yeah. This tells you again about the images and that you can't use images.
No liquidated damages?
Yeah, it's coming. It's 2 more pages. Assignment. So this is the assignment paragraph that we spent so much time on earlier, and that that is new. Seller shall have the right, this is all new, to assign all a buyer's interest in the agreement to buyer's own trust or to a wholly owned entity of buyer that is in existence at the time of the assignment. Obviously not to something that's not in existence. So a buyer has a right. They say, I want to put this in my trust. I'm going to buy it my trust. They have an absolute right here, have the right to assign it to their trust. Otherwise, buyer shall not assign any or all part of buyer's interest in this agreement without first having obtained the separate written consent of seller to a specified assignee. Such consent shall not be unreasonably withheld. So this is where it says, seller, you can't just say no. You have to have a reason. Prior to any assignment, buyer shall disclose to seller the name of the person and the amount of any monetary consideration between buyer and assignee. So they have to tell you if they're getting money for the assignment. Buyer shall provide assignee with all documents related to the assignment, including but not limited to the agreement and any disclosures. If assignee is a wholly owned entity or trust of buyer, that assignee does not need to re-sign or initial all the documents provided. Okay, So if you're assigning it to your trust and it's still just you and your husband, or just you, or you and your whatever, then you don't have to re-sign all the documents. Otherwise you do.
Cindy,
Yeah.
what if the seller didn't want to sell to a neighbor, and the neighbor used somebody else to buy the property initially, and then that person's going to assign it over to the neighbor who the seller didn't want to sell it to originally?
In the same transaction?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be the reason why a seller, I mean, again, they just can't be unreasonable. I hate this guy. I think he's whatever, maybe that's not unreasonable.
That's not, but I thought the seller had the right to sell the property to whoever they wanted to.
Well, boy, where have you been? Have you not heard about fair employment in housing?
Yeah, but it's still
I know it's not this situation, but I keep hearing people say that, and it's like, really?
So what do we do?
I think that the seller could withhold consent. I do. I honestly do.
Okay.
Can you assign a portion of this? Like if it's a property that's
you could become co-buyers, or you could
okay, so that's considered assignment as well, right?
Right, and that's all. And then you see at the end it says the form AOAA. It gives you a place to check whether you're assigning the whole thing or only a partial. Okay, so that's pretty much it. We talked about delivery and days delivered. Legally authorized signer is now defined as a person who is okay by paragraph 32 or 33, which is the representative capacity signature disclosure. I think the rest of it is pretty. I don't think there's anything in here that's new. Terms and conditions, no, so to continue to offer the property prior to notification of acceptance. They put in here that, seller has the right to continue to offer the property for sale and to accept any other offer at any time prior to notification of acceptance. Duh. I mean, I don't know. Is that something that needed to be in that 16-page contract? Clearly they do. I feel like they've written this so that, I guess anyone picking it up will understand. Some of this is just like common law that I don't know. Seems like overkill. Okay. Legally authorized signer. We talked about that. Okay.
It's not common to the buyer.
What?
It's not common to the buyer.
Right. Well, yeah. And if the buyer reads the whole agreement, yes, it will now make sense to a buyer or seller if they read this. Yes, I agree with you. They changed this paragraph that said representative capacity to legally authorized signer. And then it talks about the legally authorized signer and doing a representative capacity. So that's pretty much what it is. No more pay for acceptance. Oh yeah, I already did that. Okay. Liquidated damages is on the top of the next page. Mediation, nothing requires initials. Arbitration of disputes still requires initials. Kind of up to you whether you want to recommend arbitration or not recommend arbitration. I don't know. I don't have an opinion on that really. Okay. Offer, expiration of offer. Okay. Entity buyers. Yeah, so they're talking about the representative capacity signature disclosure here. But it's on the form. They're just talking about what you have to fill out the form. Okay, that's it. Notice that paragraph C says the RPA has 16 pages so that somebody knows that they've got every page. Buyer acknowledges receipt and that they signed it. You print the name of the legally authorized signer. Okay, so now we're not printing the name. If the seller is XYZ LLC, we're not printing XYZ LLC under the name. We're printing the name of the legally authorized signer, who is John Smith, member. Okay, that's it. Acceptance is acceptance. Again, subject to the counteroffer or a backup offer. They've added that one. Also, again, they've added the space where if you're an entity or a trust or whatever, you sign, fill up, do that one. And that's pretty much it, except for the very last page, which we went over to start with, in case you would be too tired to hear it now, is that we make sure that you fill in the designated electronic delivery address. Make sure that you have the other agent fill theirs in as well, so that we can be assured that when we send a document, we're sending it to the right place and they will accept it. And that, how long did it take? It took, oh gosh, an hour and 45. Okay. That was pretty close. So does anyone have any questions? Or if you want, you could put your questions in the chat box and I'll get back to you. So, because I think we've used up enough of everyone's time today and I'm sure you all have things to do.
Cindy, I'm
So-
going to post
yeah.
that guide, that
Oh yeah,
second
and
document.
the other thing I got when I took the class was a guide to the new RPA. And they didn't go over it, and I have honestly, in all honesty, I haven't even looked at it yet. But I'm passing that on to you. I think if you have a question about something, you can compare it. You can go to the guide, and it kind of explains things. So
It is now in the chat box.
it's just something that you might want to download and keep, or yeah, just keep on your computer. So that's it. Thank you all for coming. I'm so glad that people are going to come and that they're going to, want to learn this new contract. It's a little bit different. It's not a lot different, but it's a little bit different. And I think we're going to like it. I agree with Lydia or whoever put that way back then. I think that it's going to be so much easier to use with the paragraph 3 on it. I feel like that should have been
When
a
they're
whole
gonna
separate
start?
document, but it
Yeah, when is gonna be starting this contract?
what?
When is it
When
gonna
is it going to
start with this?
start?
Oh, it's sometime in December. I don't think I have seen a date yet, but I sometime in December. I don't think it's December 1st, but hopefully by December 1st, we're going to have the other documents that are brand new and that, so that we can be prepared for those. I know it was a lot. And so you might think of questions. And as you know, I'm not going anywhere anytime. Feel
Great
free
job,
to
Cindy.
email me,
Thank
ask me, or
you.
text me, ask me a question. Anything you need to, any